The night was quiet on the human outpost. Only the soft hum of machines filled the air. The base was surrounded by tall steel walls. Shining under the cold moonlight of the alien planet, most soldiers were resting after their long duty. But inside the main chamber, one young alien girl sat silently, her strange glowing eyes watching everything. She was unlike any creature the soldiers had seen before. Her skin had a soft shimmer, her hair fell in silver strands, and her movements were both sharp and graceful. Some called her dangerous, others called her a prisoner. But no one truly understood her. They only kept her under watch, waiting to see if she would attack or obey. Among them was Lieutenant James, a human officer with calm eyes and a steady voice. He had seen war, he had seen fear, but when he looked at the alien girl, he felt something different. It wasn't danger, it was mystery. He often wondered why her eyes looked less like a predator's and more like a child's, lost in a place she didn't belong. That evening, as the soldiers argued about her, one guard joked, "She looks like a wild pet. Maybe she needs a leash." The room filled with laughter, but the alien girl's face grew hard. She slowly turned her glowing eyes toward them and said in a clear, sharp voice, "I'm not your pet." The room fell silent. Her words were filled with fire, her voice trembling with anger. For a moment, even the loudest soldiers had no reply. Lieutenant James stood still, watching her closely. He noticed something others did not. Her hands were shaking, not with rage alone, but with fear. Later that night, James walked his usual patrol, his boots echoing against the metal floor. He passed the chamber where the alien girl was kept. To his surprise, she was no longer pacing the corner as usual. She was sitting on the floor, curled up with her arms around her knees. Her eyes followed him in silence, as if she had been waiting. James stopped, unsure. "Why are you sitting there?" he asked softly. The girl didn't answer, but her eyes seemed to soften. He took a slow step closer, careful not to frighten her. "You're safe here," James whispered, though he wasn't sure if she believed him. The alien girl tilted her head, her silver hair falling to one side. Her lips moved slowly, repeating the same words she had said before. "Not your pet." Her voice was quieter this time, almost sad. James felt something heavy inside his chest. She wasn't just angry, she was hurt. But before he could say anything else, the sound of heavy footsteps came from the hall. Other soldiers approached, laughing loudly, carrying their drinks. The girl quickly turned away, hiding her face. When James looked again, she was pressed tightly against the corner, her body tense like a frightened animal. James continued his patrol, but her words stayed in his mind. Hours passed, and the base grew silent again. The soldiers had gone to their bunks, and the hallways were empty. When James returned to check the chamber one last time, he froze. The alien girl was no longer in the corner. She was at the edge of the bars, watching him with glowing eyes that reflected the dim lights. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then, slowly, carefully, she reached her hand through the bars, not in attack, but in hesitation. James didn't move closer. But he didn't move away either. He could see the struggle in her face, the fear, the pride, and something else. Trust. Finally, she withdrew her hand and stepped back. Then, without a word, she lowered herself to the floor, curling her small frame like a child seeking warmth. She looked at James once more, and then rested her head gently against the edge, where his knee almost touched the bars. James froze, his breath caught in his chest. This was the same girl who shouted she wasn't a pet. It's the same girl who glared with pride at everyone. And yet, here, she was curling up as if she found safety in his presence. He didn't understand why. Was she trying to trick him? Was it some alien instinct? Or was it something far simpler? Maybe she just needed comfort. Something she had never known before. As her breathing grew slower, almost like a soft purr, James felt an uneasiness inside him. If anyone saw this, they would call her weak whore. Call him a fool, but in that moment, he couldn't bring himself to push her away. He just stood there, silent, staring down at the strange alien girl who refused to be anyone's pet, and yet chose his lap as her place of rest. For the first time, James realized something dangerous. This was no longer just a mission. This was the beginning of a bond that could change everything. And as the night grew darker, he could not shake the feeling that whatever had started here would lead to something far greater. Something the universe itself might not be ready for. The next morning, sunlight from the alien sky poured through the small windows of the human outpost. The base woke with its usual noise boots striking the metal floor. Voices shouting orders, the smell of machines, and recycled air. But Lieutenant James's thoughts were still trapped in the memory of the night before. He could not forget how the alien girl had curled up near him, how her words echoed, "Not your pet." When James entered the chamber that day, the girl was standing tall again. Her glowing eyes sharp and cold. She did not look weak. She did not look afraid. She looked like a warrior holding her pride. The other soldiers pointed at her, muttering warnings. "Keep your distance." "James, she's only pretending." One of them said, "She attacked the moment you let your guard down." Another added, James didn't argue, but his eyes stayed. On her, the girl's body was tense, her arms crossed tightly, her jaw firm. She refused to show softness while the others watched. It was as if invisible walls surrounded her, walls built from fear, anger, and pride. Later, during lunch, the soldiers joked again, their words cruel and careless. "She's like a wild cat. Maybe she should be tamed." One laughed, but James noticed something whenever they laughed. Her glowing eyes flicked toward him, not with rage, but with hurt. She was listening, but she only cared about his reaction that evening. James walked his usual patrol again. He passed the chamber slowly, to his surprise. She was watching him quietly from the shadows. No words came from her lips, but her gaze was not hostile. It was searching, almost questioning. James stopped, his voice calm. "You don't trust them, do you?" Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. After a pause, she whispered softly, "Humans laugh, like masters, like chains." Her broken human language made James's chest tighten. She wasn't just proud, she was carrying wounds. Perhaps her people had treated her the same way, like an animal, like property. No wonder she hated the word pet. James crouched closer to her side of the bars. "No chains here," he said quietly. "You're not my pet." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Her glowing eyes searched his face, looking for lies. Then she turned her head away sharply, muttering again, "Not pet." But her voice trembled, and James knew she wanted to believe him, even if she couldn't. The next days were filled with tension. The alien girl refused to follow orders from the guards, refused to eat when they told her. She only obeyed small things when James asked gently. This created anger among the soldiers. "She listens only to you," one said with suspicion. "Are you getting too close to her?" James ignored their accusations, but inside he was conflicted. Was he making a mistake? Was she using him? Or was she truly reaching out for trust? One evening, the outpost was quieter than usual. James walked past her chamber and found her sitting on the floor, her knees drawn close again. He hesitated, then sat down on the opposite side of the bars. For a long time, they didn't speak. Then, in a soft voice, she whispered, "You? Different. Not laugh, not chain." James felt something stir inside him, a connection, thin and fragile, but real. He nodded, speaking carefully. "I don't see you as a pet. I see you as you." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of warmth, but just as quickly, she hid it. Pulling the walls back around her heart, she crossed her arms, her face hard again. You. Human. All same. James wanted to argue, but he stayed silent, because he could see her fear of hoping, fear of being wrong again. She wanted to trust. But she had been betrayed too many times before. The wall between them was not made of steel, it was made of pride and pain. She built it high each day in front of others. But each night, when the base was quiet, James saw cracks in it. Cracks where fear and longing slipped through, that night as the alarms dimmed and silence fell. James walked past again. The alien girl was curled up once more, her head low, her silver hair falling across her face. This time, she didn't move. When he approached, instead, she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Not pet. Safe. With you." James's heart tightened. He knew then that behind her walls, there was a truth she could not say yet. She wasn't fighting to be dangerous. She was fighting to be seen. And though the walls stood strong, James realized something important. Every wall has a crack, and he was slowly, carefully finding his way through. Days turned into weeks on the human outpost. The alien girl was still kept under guard, still treated with suspicion by most of the soldiers. But something had changed, something quiet, something only Lieutenant James noticed. Whenever James entered the chamber, her eyes followed him, not with anger, not with hatred, but with something unspoken. She would not speak much, but her body softened, her shoulders lowered. It was as if her pride fell away when he was near. One afternoon, James brought her food himself. The tray of simple rations slid across the metal floor. At first, she ignored it, turning her face away like she had always done with the others. But when she saw James still waiting, still calm, she finally reached out. Her long fingers picked the bread slowly, carefully, and she ate in silence. When James turned to leave, a faint whisper reached him. "Thank." He froze, almost unsure he had heard it. But when he looked back, her glowing eyes were on him. They were not cold anymore. They were watching, curious, almost gentle. He gave a small nod. And for the first time, she didn't turn away. At night, James often stayed late on patrol. Sometimes he would sit near the chamber, reading his old worn book while the base grew quiet. The alien girl would watch him from the shadows, silent. Then one evening, she stepped closer to the bars. "What is that?" she asked in broken human speech, pointing at the book. James looked up, surprised she was speaking so clearly. "It's a story," he explained, holding the book up so she could see. Words written by humans, about journeys, battles, and love. She tilted her head, her silver hair catching the dim light. "Love." She repeated, the word strange on her tongue. James hesitated, then answered softly, "Yes." When someone's heart belongs to another, not chains, not masters. Something different. Her glowing eyes widened, and she pressed closer to the bar's aliens. "No such word," she whispered. Then her face hardened again, as if she regretted saying too much. But James could see the crack in her walls growing wider. The bond between them grew in small, quiet moments. Sometimes she asked simple questions. Why you fight? Why humans laugh loud? Why sky red? Sometimes James asked about her people, though she rarely answered. But every time their voices touched, the silence between them grew warmer. The soldiers noticed too. "She only speaks to you." One guard said with suspicion, "Careful, James. She's playing you." Another warned. James ignored them, but deep inside, even he didn't understand. Why did she trust him? Why only him? One evening, the base shook with sudden alarms. A malfunction in the outer walls caused sparks to fly, and the lights dimmed. Soldiers rushed through the halls, weapons ready. James hurried toward the chamber, worried she might panic. When he reached her, she was crouched low, her body tense, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. The hum of the broken machines echoed around them. James raised his hand slowly, his voice steady. "It's just a malfunction. You're safe." She stared at him, trembling slightly. Then, before he could step back, she reached her hand through the bars. Her cold fingers brushed against his wrist. For the first time, she touched him not with claws, not with force, but with need. James stood still, his heart racing. He wanted to pull away. But something inside him refused. Instead, he let her fingers rest there. Feeling her strange warmth, her voice came soft, almost like a plea. "Not pet, not prisoner. With you." The words struck him harder than any bullet. This wasn't just trust, this was something deeper. Something dangerous. It was a bond forming between human and alien. A bond no one else would accept. Later that night, as the base returned to silence, James sat outside the chamber again. The girl moved closer to the bars, her glowing eyes watching him as if she were memorizing every detail of his face. "Why you stay?" she asked softly. James closed his book and looked at her. "Because. Maybe you're not as different as they think," he said. "Maybe you're more like us than anyone believes." Her lips curved into something strange, something almost like a smile. It was small, it was fragile, but it was real. For a moment, she looked less like a prisoner, less like a stranger, and more like a lost soul who had finally found someone willing to see her. But just as their bond grew, so did the danger. The other soldiers were restless, their suspicion turning into anger. "She's dangerous. She'll break free one day. We need to end this," one soldier muttered. James overheard their words and knew trouble was coming. Yet when he looked at her, curled near the bars, watching him with quiet trust, he realized he could never let her go back to being seen as a beast. The strange bond was real, and whether it would save them or destroy them, James could no longer deny it. The walls between them were falling, and something entirely new was being built in their place. The outpost was always noisy during the day, filled with shouts, heavy footsteps, and the hum of machines. But at night, silence wrapped the base like a heavy blanket, broken only by the sound of the wind rushing outside the steel walls. James liked the nights because nights revealed truths that the day tried to hide. That night, as James walked his patrol, alarms suddenly blared through the halls. Red lights flashed against the walls. A loud siren shook the stillness. "Warning, containment breach detected." The machine voice repeated again and again. Soldiers rushed past him with weapons ready, their faces tense. James ran toward the alien girl's chamber, afraid of what he might find. When he arrived, she was already pressed against the bars, her glowing eyes wide with fear. No, she wasn't trying to escape. She wasn't fighting. She was trembling. Her silver hair clung to her face, her breathing quick and shallow. "Stay back," a soldier shouted, raising his rifle at her. But James stepped in front of the weapon. "Lower it," he barked, his voice firm. The soldier hesitated, anger flashing in his eyes, but obeyed. James crouched near her chamber, his voice softer. "Now, it's only the alarms," he explained. "You're safe here. Nothing will harm you." But she shook her head violently, her voice breaking. "No. No safe. They come. They always come when red lights." Her trembling hands clutched the bars, her body shrinking as if she was reliving a memory. James's heart sank. This wasn't fear of humans. It wasn't fear of soldiers. It was something older. Something buried deep inside her. He leaned closer, speaking carefully. "Who comes? Who are you afraid of?" Her glowing eyes filled with pain, and finally, she whispered, "My people. They make me. Theirs, chains, collars. Red light mean punishment." James froze, the truth hitting him like a strike. She wasn't dangerous because she was born that way. She was dangerous because she had been treated as property. Trained to fear, trained to obey. The walls she built around her were not just Pride they were scars. The alarms died down after the engineers fixed the systems. The base returned to silence, but James stayed with her. She was still trembling, her voice low and broken. Not pet. Not toy, but they never see. Never believe. James's chest tightened in that moment. She didn't look like a warrior or a prisoner. She looked like a lost child. Abandoned in a world that never gave her kindness. Slowly, James reached through the bars, his hand open. To his surprise, she pressed her forehead against it, her glowing eyes closing. Her voice came like a fragile whisper. You believe? James nodded slowly, his voice steady. Yes, I believe you. You're not a pet. You're not a toy. You're you. For a long time, she stayed like that, pressed against his hand. Then she pulled back quickly, as if ashamed of showing weakness. She stood tall again, hiding her trembling behind hard eyes. But James had already seen the truth behind her sharp words and her pride. There was fear, a fear that shaped every move she made. The next morning, whispers filled the base. Soldiers had seen her trembling, had seen her hide behind James during the alarms. Some mocked her weakness, others grew more suspicious. If she's that scared. She break down one day, one muttered, or worse, she snap and turn on all of us, another warned. James said nothing, but deep inside, his determination grew stronger. She wasn't a threat, she was a victim, and he would prove it, even if no one else believed him. That evening, James brought her another tray of food. This time, instead of sliding it across the floor, he sat down near the bars. The alien girl watched him carefully, her walls already rising again. You see weakness, she said sharply. You tell others. James shook his head. No. What I see is strength. You survived what they did to you? That is not weakness. Her lips parted slightly, her glowing eyes uncertain. For a moment, the pride in her face wavered. Strength. She repeated softly, as if the word was new. Then, quickly, she turned away. But James noticed her hands had stopped trembling. Later that night, the outpost was quiet once more. James found himself near her chamber again, sitting against the bars with his book. The alien girl shifted closer, curling on her side, her glowing eyes watching him in silence. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, finally, she whispered, If chains come again, you stop them. James looked at her, his chest heavy. Yes, I'll stop them, he promised. Not because you're mine, but because you deserve to be free. Her glowing eyes softened, and for the first time, her voice carried no anger, no pride, only hope. Free. She repeated, almost like a prayer. Then, slowly, she curled into herself again, her body small, her breathing soft. And though the steel walls still trapped her, James knew something had changed inside her heart. She was no longer just the alien girl who shouted, I'm not your pet. She was someone who finally dared to believe just a little that freedom was possible. The days after the red light alarm were uneasy in the outpost. Whispers spread among the soldiers like smoke in the wind. Some said the alien girl was weak and broken. Others said her fear was just an act, but no matter what they believed, all of them agreed on one thing. She trusted only Lieutenant James. This made the others restless. Why does she only listen to you? One soldier asked angrily during breakfast. You think that makes her safe? It makes her more dangerous. She's using you. James didn't answer, but his eyes grew hard. He knew their words were not just suspicion, they were warnings. That evening, when James returned to her chamber, the alien girl was pacing like a caged predator. Her glowing eyes burned with frustration. Her movements sharp. When she saw James, she stopped, gripping the bars tightly. They laugh again. She said in her broken voice, They say I bow to human. They say your pet. James felt his chest tighten. They don't understand, he said calmly. You're not my pet. They're not anyone's. They're afraid of what they can't see. Her glowing eyes narrowed. You believe? Yes, James said, without hesitation. I believe. For a moment, she softened, her hands loosening on the bars. But before either could say more, heavy footsteps approached. A group of soldiers stormed into the chamber, their faces filled with suspicion and anger. We've had enough. One of them said, raising his voice. She only obeys when you ask her. That proves she's playing you. We'll test her ourselves. James stepped forward, his voice sharp. Stand down. But the soldiers ignored him, their eyes fixed on the alien girl. One of them mocked her, banging his weapon against the bars. Come on, beast. Show us what you really are. The alien girl's body went rigid, her glowing eyes blazing with fury. She bared her sharp teeth, her voice rising in a low growl. In an instant, she lashed out, her claw-like hand striking the bars with such force that sparks flew. The soldiers stumbled back, fear flashing in their eyes. She's dangerous. One shouted, lock her down tighter, or kill her before she turns on us. James's heart pounded. The girl was still pressed against the bars, her body trembling not from power, but from shame. Her eyes darted to James, filled with panic. Not me, not beast. You believe. James stood between her and the soldiers, his voice strong. She's not what you think. She reacted because you pushed her. You provoked her. But the soldiers were not convinced. One of them shouted, she's a threat to all of us. If she listens only to you, then maybe you're the problem too. The room went silent at those words. James felt the weight of their suspicions settling on him. He knew then that his bond with her was no longer just endued, was dangerous. Not only for her, but for him as well. Later that night, James found her sitting low in the corner of her chamber, her body curled, her glowing eyes dim. She didn't look proud or strong anymore. She looked defeated. When James approached, she whispered softly, they hate me. They hate you. Because of me. James crouched near the bars, his voice firm but gentle. They don't understand. But I do, and I won't turn away. Her eyes filled with tears, she quickly tried to hide. Her voice broke as she whispered, if they hurt you, it's my fault. James shook his head. No. If they hurt me, it's because they're blind. You don't have to carry that weight. For the first time, she reached her hand through the bars again, but not trembling this time, steady, deliberate. James placed his hand against hers, feeling the strange warmth of her skin. The bond between them deepened in that silent moment, and yet, James knew the danger around them was growing stronger each day. The next morning, the commander of the outpost called James into his office. The commander's face was hard, his voice sharp. I've received too many complaints, he said. The soldiers believe you're compromised. They think you're protecting her instead of protecting us. James stood tall, his jaw firm. I'm protecting the truth, he replied. She's not a threat. She's terrified. She needs understanding, not chains. The commander slammed his fist on the table. She's an alien. She's not like us. You can't save her, James. You're letting your feelings blind you. James didn't answer, but inside, his resolve only grew stronger. If no one else would see her truth, then he would, even if it cost him everything. That night, when James returned to her chamber, she was waiting at the bars. Her glowing eyes met his, filled with quiet strength. You fight for me? She whispered. Why? James hesitated, then spoke honestly. Because you're not my pet. You're not my prisoner. You're someone who deserves a chance. She pressed her forehead against the bars, her voice trembling. You believe, when no one does. I trust only you. James's chest tightened at her words. The bond was no longer just strange, it was unbreakable. But he also knew this trust would be tested again. And soon, They would both face a choice that could change everything. The outpost had been tense. For days, soldiers whispered in corners, their eyes always sharp whenever James walked past. The alien girl's presence had divided the camp. Half wanted her gone. Half wanted her dead, and in the middle of it all stood James, the only one who believed in her. But the night of the attack changed everything. It began with a deep rumble that shook the steel walls of the base. At first, the soldiers thought it was just another malfunction. Then the sky outside lit up with streaks of fire, alarms screamed through the halls, and red lights bathed every surface. Incoming hostiles. The commander shouted through the intercom, all units to defense positions. James grabbed his weapon and rushed toward the barricades, but as he ran, his thoughts went to Hertha, alien girl locked in her chamber. Would they leave her behind? Would they execute her if the base fell? When James reached her cell, he found her already standing at the bars. Her glowing eyes were sharper than ever, her body tense. "They come," she whispered. "My people. They come for me." James froze. Her people. The same ones who had chained her, who had made her fear the red lights. They were here to reclaim her, not to save her. The base shook again as explosions roared outside. Soldiers shouted orders. Weapons fired in the distance. James had only seconds to decide. "Stay behind me," he ordered. But she shook her head fiercely, her voice rising. "No, not chains again. I fight with you." James stared at her, his chest tightening. He could see the truth in her eyes. She would rather die beside him than be dragged back in chains. The commander's voice rang out again. "All units prepare for breach. They're breaking through the west wall." Soldiers rushed past, their boots echoing through the halls. One soldier saw James near the chamber and shouted, "Leave her. She's one of them. If they take her back, we're safer." But James's answer was firm, his voice like steel. "She's not with them." The soldier spat on the floor and ran off, but his words cut deep. No one trusted her. No one but James. The first breach came with a deafening blast. Metal tore apart, smoke filled the air, and alien warriors poured into the base. Their armor glowed with strange symbols, their weapons humming with deadly energy. The soldiers fought hard, but they were outnumbered. James raised his rifle and fired, taking down 2 attackers. But more kept coming, their steps heavy, their glowing eyes locked on the chamber. They wanted her. They wanted their property back. The alien girl pressed her hands against the bars, her voice rising in a desperate cry. "Let me out. I fight." James hesitated for only a heartbeat, then slammed the release code into the panel. The door hissed open, and she stepped out, her body glowing faintly with energy he had never seen before. For the first time, she was free, not curled in fear, not trapped behind steel, but standing tall. The alien warriors froze when they saw her. One shouted in their strange tongue, demanding her return, but she bared her sharp teeth, her voice echoing through the hall. "No, not yours. Never again." Then she moved, faster than James thought possible. She leaped into the attackers, her claws slicing through armor, her movements both brutal and graceful. She fought not as a beast, but as a warrior. Every strike filled with years of buried rage. James stood beside her, covering her flank with his rifle. Together, they fought like one human and alien, side by side. And for the first time, James saw her not as a prisoner, not as a frightened girl, but as an equal. The battle raged through the base. Soldiers who had once mocked her now stared in shock as she tore through the enemy with unmatched fury. Some shouted in disbelief, "She's fighting for us." Others muttered in awe, "She's protecting him." But not all soldiers were convinced. The commander barked through the intercom, "Don't trust her. She's still one of them. Kill her if she turns." James ignored the voice. his focus only on the fight. He watched as she threw down the last of the invaders in their hall, her glowing eyes blazing with triumph. When the smoke cleared, she turned to him, her chest heaving, her silver hair tangled. "You see now," she said, her voice rough but steady. "Not pet. Not chains. I fight. With you?" James lowered his weapon slowly, his breath heavy. "Yes," he said softly. "With me?" But the battle was far from over. The base walls were still shaking. The fight still roaring outside. The soldiers were divided, some ready to accept, her others ready to turn their guns on her. And James knew this was only the beginning. The turning point had come. The girl was no longer a frightened prisoner, no longer just words behind bars. She had chosen her side, and it was his. But in choosing him, she had declared war against her own people. As James looked at her standing in the ruins of the hall, her glowing eyes fierce but tired, he knew one truth. From this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The outpost burned under the alien night sky. Smoke curled from broken walls. Sparks rained from shattered machines. The battle had left. The air thick with fire and ash, but inside the ruined halls, James and the alien girl still stood side by side, breathing hard, weapons ready. For the first time since her capture, the soldiers didn't look at her with disgust or fear. They looked at her with awe. She had fought not against them, but for them, and the truth was impossible to deny. She had saved lives. Yet the silence after battle didn't bring peace. It brought whispers. "She fought with us," one soldier muttered, "but can we trust her tomorrow?" Another asked. The commander's voice crackled through the intercom, filled with anger and suspicion. "She's still one of them. Don't forget where she came from." The alien girl's glowing eyes hardened at those words. She turned toward James, her voice low but steady. "They will never see me. Not chains, not pet. Only threat." James stepped closer, his voice firm. "Not all of them. Some will see. I see." For a moment, her eyes softened, and she whispered, "You. Only you." The calm shattered as another explosion rocked the far wall. A second wave of enemy forces poured in, more disciplined and more powerful than before. The alien girl stiffened, her body tense. "They bring hunters," Sue said, her voice trembling. "Hunters never stop. They take, they break. They mine." James raised his weapon, his jaw set. "Not anymore. Not while I'm here." The hunters stormed through the smoke, their tall armored forms glowing with cruel symbols. One of them shouted in their alien tongue. Pointing at the girl, they did not fire. They advanced slowly, confidently, because to them, she was not a warrior, not a person. She was property returning home. The alien girl's body shook, her pride clashing with the terror of memory. Chains, collars, punishment. All the nightmares she had whispered to James were walking toward her now. For a heartbeat, fear almost won. But then her eyes flicked to James, and she saw no chains in his gaze, no ownership, only belief. Her hands clenched into fists, her voice rising in defiance. "Not yours. Never again." With a cry, she charged into the hunters, James covering her with precise fire. Together they fought like a storm, his bullets striking weak points in their armor, her claws ripping through metal. The hall filled with screams, sparks, and blood. Soldiers who had doubted her now raised their rifles and fought beside her. Inspired by her fury, the last hunter fell with a heavy crash. The silence that followed was broken only by ragged breaths. James lowered his weapon, his arms trembling from exhaustion. Beside him, the alien girl stood tall, her body bruised but unbroken, her glowing eyes blazing with victory. She turned to him, her voice hoarse but filled with strength. "You fight with me, not master, not pet, equal." James nodded, his chest heavy with unspoken emotion. Yes, equal. Her lips curved into something rare, fragile smile. For the first time since they met, she wasn't just surviving, she was living. Later, when the fires were put out and the soldiers counted their dead, James sat near the edge of the ruined hall. The alien girl came quietly, her silver hair falling over her shoulders. Her steps light. Without a word, she lowered herself beside him, curling close the way she had once done in her cage, but this time there were no bars between them. This time she rested her head in his lap, not out of fear, but out of choice. James froze at first, unsure if the soldiers were watching, unsure if this moment was allowed, but then her quiet voice rose, soft and trembling. Not your pet, but maybe yours. His heart clenched at her words. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his voice steady. You're not mine. You're free. But if you choose to stay, I'll stand with you. She closed her glowing eyes, her body finally at peace. And for the first time since the day she had whispered those angry words, I'm not your pet, she no longer sounded like she was fighting the world. She sounded like she had found a place to belong. The soldiers who saw them didn't laugh, didn't mock. Some still whispered in suspicion, but many remained silent because they had seen with their own eyes what she had done. They had seen the bond that turned the tide of battle, and deep inside, every soldier knew the truth. This was not the end. This was the beginning of something far greater, a bond that defied chains, fear, and even war itself. James looked down at her as she rested against him, his thoughts heavy. The universe might never understand, but he did, and that was enough. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as master and pet, not as captor and prisoner, but as two souls who had found something no cage could break, more than survival, more than trust, something more than a bond.